So, Ruth, we're talking about clients or even individuals, perhaps people in your world, that initially kind of come across as really lovely, considerate, really kind of mindful of other people's experiences and needs. And over time, it's those very things that can start really irritating you or frustrating you that it doesn't shift. And this is how we differentiate between a pattern of interpersonal dysfunction, if you like, versus a healthy adult who's considerate of the needs of others. I'm Rita. I'm a clinical psychologist and advanced schema therapist. Welcome to 7 Minute Schemas.
And I'm Ruth Holt. I'm also a clinical psychologist and advanced schema therapist, supervisor trainer. And today we are looking at a particular mode called a compliant surrenderer mode. Rita, it's a tricky area, I think, the modes in schema therapy that are about freezing, or perhaps we might better define it as submitting. How would you define a submit or surrender kind of mode?
This idea that we're just kind of behaving in a way that results in regulating another person, typically out of fear or guilt or shame or whatever it may be. But we have to, we find ourselves kind of focusing what other people want in order to get approval or to feel better about ourselves.
Yeah, so that compliance surrender mode is really often driven by three schemas, isn't it? It could be approval seeking. So I have to make everyone else like me. I have to earn my approval. Self-sacrifice, where I have to give in to the need of everybody else. That's the right way to be. And it's not okay to put myself and my needs on the table. Or thirdly, subjugation schema, which is much more powerless. I have to give in order to maybe not be rejected or hurt. And those schemas, it could be one of them or all of them, drive this compliant surrenderer mode, which can feel very powerless in relationships. What are the kinds of places we might have learnt this mode?
Well, I guess if we think about those core schemas, then the early caregiving environment, there was something about it that where your needs weren't important, that you were kind of conditioned to be mindful or concerned about the needs, expectations, wants, desires of other people in the environment, whether it was your attachment figures or siblings or whatever it may be. And so, in order to be seen, in order not to be shamed or ridiculed, as long as I complied and didn't react, then I was probably safe. I was seen. There was something about doing those or engaging in those behaviors that got my need met. And so, very, very adaptive early on in that type of environment.
Yeah, and again, we may have ended up with some schema chemistry that perhaps did draw us then. If our clients are presenting with this mode, they may now be in current dynamics where, again, they've got to comply, they've got to give in. Perhaps they might be in a relationship with someone who's on the narcissism spectrum or very controlling, very dominant in the dynamic. And they're really, giving in a way that does not feel good. In fact, there might be some anger sitting in the background. Some clients will have perhaps a kind of a passive aggressive anger, or sort of indirect anger, or maybe actually a lot of anger that kind of comes out. So they end up in relationship dynamics where they perhaps don't have much of a voice or are too compliant, and then have a burst of anger or rage, which is a bit confusing both for them and perhaps the people they're living with.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Ruth. I think, there is some literature that would suggest there's a correlation between self-sacrifice and anger, that at some point it builds up and then they explode because of their needs not being met or expecting to be seen or whatever it may be. I think one of the things too with this compliant surrender mode, it could also be a way in which people seek proximity and create connection. As long as I sacrifice myself, then that's the way that I connect with people. That's the only way I know how to connect with people.
Yeah, and that can actually make therapy quite difficult, right? So in therapy, if I've got a strong compliance surrenderer mode, even if I don't really like the direction the therapist is going or I'm not comfortable, it will be very hard for me to voice that. I might kind of just, be eager to please and nodding along and really actually be more concerned with the therapist than me. I remember a client telling me that they were engaged in a sort of health program that they found really, they didn't like it. It was painful. It wasn't helping. And they were there for 3 years in their compliance surrender mode before they felt they could share that it wasn't working. And that client said to me, people they've checked in and said, how are you going? And I say, oh, really good, because I don't want to hurt their feelings. So that's an example of where that compliance surrenderer mode can make therapy or medical in relationships or any kind of places where we need to be looked after, that can kind of undermine the very thing we're trying to do in those dynamics.
And in some ways, just through your example, Ruth, I think this is what makes it difficult, because maybe it can have the guise of being quite healthy adult. There, that you kind of believe that this is the patient's truth, that they are okay, etc. But really, they're just saying what it is that they think the other person needs to hear. It can be a really difficult mode, particularly when you've called it out and you're really trying to change that pattern for the individual in the relationship with you, but also outside. And so I guess one of the tips maybe is just being mindful of not reassuring and asking the client to think about what their options are and what feels like the best option for them. And changing these patterns is going to create a lot of discomfort. And it's that very discomfort that we use to float back and see what it connects with.
Yes, it's also the mode that often other people don't like you changing out of. So
Yes.
they often, perhaps a boss, perhaps a best friend or a partner actually kind of likes you being in that compliant space. And when you start to shift out, you actually might get some pushback, which is really hard, because if you're looking to other people to let you know if it's okay, that will be really distressing. So yeah, I think that's a good tip to think about when it comes to compliant surrenderer. And unfortunately, we have no time for more tips, because that's our 7 minutes. So if you want to find out more about training or other options for therapy ideas for therapists, follow the link at the end of this video.